What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another album review for you guys, and today I'm talking about the latest offering from Mynded, The Last Sun. This also comes out on May 3rd, and this is an independent release, and as far as I know, no CD, vinyl, or cassette. It's just digital. I don't know if they're going to have a CD of this. I'm not sure. But this is their second studio full-length and their first one in 9 years. And this is a German thrash metal band. However, spoiler alert, doesn't really quite sound like German thrash. If anything, it sounds a little closer to Bay Area thrash than it does German thrash. But when I was doing some digging into checking this one out, I saw that they were compared to bands like Testament, Megadeth, Exodus, Anthrax, Trivium, and a couple of others. But I hear some other wrinkles kind of getting thrown into this. But pretty much straight out of the gate with the opening track, Karma's Kiss, you get plenty of thrash on here, like the riffs, the drum beats, tons of thrash going on throughout the majority of this album. But what I think is a really cool and probably the most important aspect of this album in particular to me is the bass. First off, the production on this album is pretty damn solid. It's nice and punchy, not really thin, but blah, 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 blah. But most importantly of all, the mix is spot on when it comes to like everything being layered, perfectly aligned. But most especially because the bass, and also I learned that the bassist of this band is one Jonas Joe C. Fisher, formerly of Obscura, who played on the debut album Retribution, which I think is a very underrated album, by the way. And I can see why Mynded picked him up, because, man, Jonas' bass work on this entire album is flawless. Like, there's even moments where you get little isolated bass noodles on this album, which adds a ton of dynamic to these songs. And Karma's Kiss certainly gets that off right away with a nice, cool groove, but with that cool bass line on top. Now, I'll talk more about the negatives later on, but then you get to a song like The Imposter, where it feels close to Exodus. Like, it's got more of that, like, punchy thrash bite to it. But there's a couple of other things happening here. A 3/4 time groove and blast beats. So, you're getting blast beats on a couple of these songs, which is pretty cool, because I love blast beats. Then we get to a song like Defiant. This one feels a little closer to Megadeth when it comes down to the riff writing and the songwriting itself. After a cool drum intro, you get like Megadeth riffs, some groove, and groove is kind of another big thing on this album. Like, they're able to switch speeds up quite a bit. Like, you can hear the typical thrash rhythm, blast beats, but you also get some pretty solid groove. Gang vocals coming in on the chorus before it kind of ends on a more punky D-beat stomp, which is maybe the only time on this album I would say that there's a D-beat going on. And before we continue, another cool part of this entire album was the guitar leads. Like, the leads were quite varied. They could range from tapping to shred to being very melodic, and even later on in the song Bleak, harmonized. But we move on to the song I Apostate. You get some more atonal riffs at the beginning on top of a bass line, but then the song turns into Testament, essentially, with the rhythm and the riff writing and one of the few tapping solos on the entire album. But as it progresses, and then you get to later on in the second half, in my opinion, is kind of where the album really takes off, with the song Delusions of Lunacy. This is the first of two long songs on the album that eclipse 4.5 minutes. This song is about 7.5, and this is where they kind of explore another avenue of their sound, progressive thrash, because the songwriting changes and dynamics are everywhere. Starts off with some eerie clean guitars, then it gets doomy, right? Out of nowhere, it just becomes more of a doom song, and then there's some more death metal breakdowns, I would say perhaps in the vein of Cannibal Corpse, maybe Deicide, but done through like a more thrashy filter. double time rhythms, which kind of gives it that like classic thrash feel, but also feels a little bit like a thrash metal bolt thrower. Again, killer bass work, but then you get some chugs that, dare I say, kind of remind me of old Avenged Sevenfold, which I think is a very good thing considering I love old Avenged Sevenfold. Then it gets rather melodic, and then death roars kind of pop up briefly on here, and they sound very close to My Dying Bride, which I thought was an interesting wrinkle. And then it gets back to being more thrashy towards the end. So lots of songwriting shifts. And then to the song Bleak that I brought up harmonies in the leads, but it feels almost like if Creator and Testament wrote a song together. So this is maybe the one time that Mynded sounded close to a German thrash band. Squire to King, more of that like Exodus vibe in terms of the visceral anger, visceral aggression it's going for, but it grooves hard. And then another thing that comes up here and there are breakdowns. Like, the breakdowns on this album are pretty cool. But then to the final track, Epilogue of Existence, which was 8.5 minutes and easily the best song on the entire album. You get a galloping atonal riff to start, and then it turns kind of progressive a little bit. Even a tremolo melody. It's in triplet pattern for some sections. It still retains a lot of thrash. You get some blast beats, acoustic guitars to kind of add more melody and more to the progressive nature of the song. There's even a doom section where there's gorgeous leads, off-time grooves, and then a gorgeous clean section with the acoustic guitars and some solid clean vocals. And then it just grooves hard towards the end. So that's how we end it, with a hell of a closer. Now, to the things that I don't like about this album, the biggest thing are the vocals. The vocals are not great. Like, especially in the first half of the album, when the frontman, I forget his name off the top of my head, but when he's trying to do more of a thrash bark, he sounds like a much worse version of John Conley from Nuclear Assault, and it's very off-putting. Though his vocals get slightly better as the album progresses, but not by much. Really, the two best moments of the vocals were the death roars in Delusions of Lunacy and the clean vocals on Epilogue of Existence. I feel like if they had just done more songs like that, it would help. And then, of course, the middle songs, Invincible and Neverlasting, were just kind of middle of the road. Like, Invincible feels like if Thin Lizzy was a groove metal band. And it's catchy and the bass carries everything, but the lyrics are dumb as fuck. And then Neverlasting, kind of an odd song because there's like, it's kind of schizophrenic. Kind of has moments where it reminds me of Lamb of God, but it just doesn't quite come together very well. But aside from those minor complaints, even though, well, actually, the two songs I just talked about weren't the greatest, and I didn't care for them, and most of the vocals I thought was, musically, I think for the most part, this album's going for a lot, sounding like Barrier Thrash, at times bringing in some groove metal and death metal grooves. But the two long songs where they get more prog thrash, I would hope on the next Mynded album, do more songs like those. The longer songs where there's so much dynamic and variety within the song. I feel like if this band had an album next that had like 5 or 6 songs like Delusions of Lunacy and Epilogue of Existence, they would have a hell of an album on their hands. But overall, this is still a pretty solid album. I unfortunately have to knock it quite a bit because of the criticism, so I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. I think it's a good, solid album. There's some killer moments on here, but especially for the 2 long songs, definitely check this out. But of course, that's just my opinion. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Comment, share, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.